we're going to have loaves of fun because we're talking about ways to add variations to your loaf breads. Now actually there are 3 different ways that you can make your loaves a little bit more creative and fun. The first way would be what I call the mix-in method, and that's where you are mixing all of the ingredients in your mixing bowl and it's still in the wet, the very sticky batter stage before you add all of the rest of the flour in that you need to add. So this would be a time when you would add in either liquid ingredients, like maybe you will substitute some of the water and use fruit juice instead to flavor the dough. Or this would be a good time to add any very moist or wet ingredients like shredded cheese, shredded apples or other types of fruits, or something that is very powdery like herbs, whether they're fresh or they're dried. Those are all things that would be hard to add once the dough is fully kneaded, so you would add it at that step. Now I'm going to show you the other 2 methods, which I like to call the knead-in and the roll-up. Now that is just where you take your favorite add-ins and you either knead them into the dough so that all of the little pieces of things are fully incorporated throughout the loaf, or you roll the loaf out and sprinkle those things in the middle, and then you roll it up and it makes a nice pretty swirly pattern when you cut into the bread. The first bread I'm going to show you is what we like to call birdseed bread, and that's because it's got different seeds and grains in it that look like birdseed. And actually it was my younger son Weston who gave it this name when he was about 7 years old. It was just a multi-grain bread that I had purchased, and then I started trying to make it on my own at home, and he said, "Mom, what's this birdseed bread? It's really good." And so ever since then that's what we've called it. And the first thing you want to do is take a 1/2 cup measuring cup and just gather the different things that you would like to put in it. It really is not an exact science. You put the proportions that you like of the things that you happen to have on hand. Now I usually try to use millet for the most of it. And if you're not familiar with millet, it is basically the main component of most commercial birdseed. It does look exactly like birdseed. And always when I make this bread, somebody in the class, when I'm demonstrating this live, someone says, "Can I just buy some already mixed birdseed?" And of course the answer to that is no. You need to buy grains and seeds that are meant for human consumption. But millet is a wonderful grain if you'd ever like to try experimenting, because you can use it raw in several different recipes for your baking, and it adds a nice crunch and texture. It should be kept in the freezer, and this is hulled millet. And if you remember back to our first lesson, anything that has a hull, that's the part that is the throwaway, like the egg carton. So it's fine to buy hulled grains. We just don't want to buy degerminated or debrand grains. So that is millet for the base. Then I'm also going to put in some flax seeds, and flax seeds come in regular, this darker color. They also come in a golden color, and I like the yellow and the dark mixed together. It makes a nice contrast. Then I also add some pumpkin seeds and some sunflower seeds. Sometimes if I happen to have some cracked grains, like several different multi-grains that are cracked for cereal, I will add that in. Sometimes some different nuts chopped up. So you just use whatever you like. Once you have about a 1/2 cup, you just pour it onto the bread and just start kneading it in. And this is really the fun part, I think. Kind of is almost like a spa treatment, because all of these little grains and seeds sort of feel like little microbeads. It's kind of fun. You just keep squeezing it in, rolling it in. Okay, well, it's starting to look fairly well incorporated. So just kind of go around and clean up any leftovers. Okay, now always as before, we will just take and form this into our loaf shape. Okay, just like that. Now it's ready to go into our greased prepared pan. The next bread is going to be our roll-up loaf, and this is a wonderful thing to do, especially if you're in a hurry. Maybe your family would really like to have some cinnamon rolls, but you don't have time, or you need to make plenty of sandwich bread for the week and you don't have extra room in your oven for a pan of cinnamon rolls, because the loaf breads take up a lot less room. So I'm just going to roll this out as long as I can get it. I don't want it to get very wide or very deep. I'm going to make it nice and long. Okay, the longer it is, the more swirlies it'll have. Now I've got some brown sugar and cinnamon mixed together, and I'm just going to put a line of it down the middle of the dough. One thing about whole grain dough is that compared to white bread, it really masks flavors of things that you add into it a little bit, because it has so much flavor on its own. White flour pretty much has no flavor. So when you're making some cinnamon sugar mixture, something like this, or if you're adding herbs and spices to your bread, you actually need to add more than you would think. So this cinnamon sugar mixture is pretty heavy on the cinnamon, so that you'll be able to taste it. Otherwise, it just won't have much cinnamon flavor. So you need to add more garlic to your garlic bread, more cinnamon to your cinnamon breads to be able to taste it. Okay, so now there is our roll-up loaf. And we're going to place that in our prepared pan. Just like that. So these are the knead-in and the roll-up loaves. And of course, you know the drill. We got to let them rise. Well, here are our two loaves, fully baked and cooled and ready to be sliced into. This is the kneaded-in birdseed bread, and I wanted to point out to you that whenever you use very sharp, hard or granular add-ins, you're going to get a little bit of a craggy top on it, and that's just because those sharp pieces are cutting into the gluten fibers, and so it's not always going to look as round and beautiful, but that adds to kind of the rustic charm of it. So I'll show you what it looks like when we slice into it. And this is really good for toast. You can even make croutons out of this. So anything that you would like to have be nice and crunchy. And this is the roll-up loaf, our cinnamon swirl. Now you could, if you would like to, frost this or glaze it with a powdered sugar frosting. That would make it really nice. This, of course, is delicious for toast, French toast. It's just great for peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. And you can see how it kind of has a nice swirl effect to it. Now, one thing to be aware of when you're making roll-up breads is that sometimes they take a little bit longer to bake. It really kind of depends on what you put in there. But for example, I have put ham and cheese and olives and onions chopped up and different things like that. But it's more difficult to do a temperature test when you have a roll up, because if you've got any sugar, any very sweet ingredients, any fats like cheeses, they have a much higher temperature than the dough surrounding it. So it's more difficult to tell. So what I usually do is I'm probably baking some other types of loaves in with it, such as this one. And I will do my temperature test on the one that's more the regular dough, make sure it's done. And then I will usually let the filled breads or the rolled up breads go about 5 minutes longer. So even this cinnamon swirl, it benefits from 2 or 3 extra minutes past the time that the other ones are done. That's just because those ingredients create some additional moisture and steam in there, and so they need a little bit longer for the bread to fully bake.